evening, I'm Hugh Downs, and this is 2020. On the ABC News Magazine, 2020.
Welcome. This evening we are looking at exclusive footage from former President Ronald Reagan. The 40th United States President is subject of a new biographic picture based on the New York Times bestseller An American Life, written by Robert Lindsay. Ronald Wilson Reagan was born in a small rural community of Tampico, Illinois during the harsh winter of February 6, 1911. His parents remained loving and attentive despite his father lacking job stability, and his family, including older brother Neil Reagan, often moved from town to town until they finally became settled in a small apartment located in the center of Dixon, Illinois. This family, however, still supported 4 people, although their local apartment lacked both indoor plumbing and running water. Nonetheless, Reagan continued to excel in his academics, playing varsity sports and participating in school drama program, and even being elected student body president. After graduating in 1928, he enrolled in Eureka College on the athletic scholarship. He majored in economics and sociology while playing football, running track, and even captaining his swim team. Once again, being elected student body president, becoming what would be described later as a defining moment in his life. And after graduating in 1932, he found local work as a radio sports announcer, continuing until the year of 1937, where he earned his first big break, signing a 7-year contract with big-time studio Warner Bros. Over the next 3 decades, he appeared in over 50 films, one his more well-known being All-American, a 1940 biopic about Notre Dame George Skip. During this time, Reagan was introduced and eventually wed to fellow actress Jane Wyman, with whom he'd have his first daughter Maureen and adopted son Michael. Leaving his career to serve in World War II, Reagan was ranked a captain despite being disqualified from active combat as a result of poor eyesight. Instead, he spent his time creating training films which impressed his fellow officers and contributed to his rank. After divorcing his first wife, he went on to become president of Screen Actors Guild, where he met current wife and former First Lady Nancy Reagan. She had sought his help after mistakenly being blacklisted as a suspected communist patron. Despite skepticism, the two wed in 1952, bearing 2 more children. He later landed a weekly role on a television series, The General Electric Theater, where he would tour the country as public relations representative, and this contributed heavily to his shift from conservative to more liberal political views. He became a pro-business advocate. He spoke against excessive government regulation and heavily supported reduction of government spending. In 1966, Reagan defeated Democratic candidate Edmund Pat Brown Sr. in a race for California governorship, taking the lead by almost 1 million votes and being re-elected in 1970. Undeterred by multiple failed efforts, Reagan finally received the Republican Party approval in 1980. In a general election of that year, he ousted Democrat candidate Jimmy Carter, winning the Electoral College 489-49 and earning 51% of the popular vote. At age 69, Ronald Reagan was officially our oldest elected United States president, and despite his age, he was heavily supported by younger generations. In his 1981 inaugural speech, he announced that government is not the solution to our problems, government is the problem. He necessitated a new era, one of national renewal, seeking the possibility of America becoming a source of hope for those who did not have freedom. President Reagan would go on to survive an assassination attempt in 1981 and contribute to history by appointing Judge Sandra Day O'Connor as the first woman to serve in the U.S. Supreme Court. Today, many so reference Reagan as the great communicator due to his compassion for others and undeniable charisma. Among many displays in Reagan's presidential library is a 6,000-pound graffiti-covered piece of the Berlin Wall, gifted to him by the people. Forever remaining a symbol of countless efforts of reconciliation and reminding us that peace is not the absence of conflict, it is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means. Now we take a look at exclusive footage of President Reagan.
I always like to start out my speeches with a joke to lighten the mood. There was an American and a Soviet arguing about their countries, and the American said, "Look, I'm able to go into the Oval Office, slam my hands on the president's desk, and say, 'I don't like the way you run our country.' Soviet said, 'I can do that too.' 'Really? You can do that?' said the American. Soviet said, 'Why, of course I can. I can go into the Kremlin, go into the General Secretary's office, pound my fist on his desk, and say, 'I don't like the way President Reagan's running his country.' The worries began at the start of my presidency. I had to deal with the evil empire and the economic crisis and many more challenges that faced our great country. First, I would like to address the economic crisis that threatened our way of life. My administration and I believed that it was best for the economy if we proceeded with a series of tax cuts, and this would have caused the people to have more money in their hands. This plan would be later known as Reaganomics, and it contained cuts in the areas of government spending, both income and capital gain taxes, business regulation, and the expansion of the money supply. I believe that reducing the taxes on business would lead to the business attaining more money, which means that they would be able to expand and hire more employees. If more people were employed, then the population would have more money to spend, which would spark the economy. This is known as trickle-down economics. My administration and I cut the corporate tax rate from 46% to 40%. In one of my speeches, I outlined the purpose for Reaganomics. This proposal for equal reduction in everyone's tax rates will expand our national prosperity, enlarge national incomes, and increase opportunities for all Americans. At first, my policy was failing because the value of the dollar rose due to high interest rates, leading to our exports in other countries being more expensive, which meant that we were importing more than we were exporting. This caused economic turmoil until 1983, when the economy stabilized and we enjoyed a period of prosperity. I wanted to counteract our spending on defense by cutting social programs so we would have more money. But I knew that to attack Medicare and Social Security would be a lost cause because people were so grounded on that idea. Our debt nearly tripled from $1 trillion to $3 trillion. The growth of the economy was great at the time, but it would cause problems for later generations. I doubled the number of items that were subject to trade restraint from 12% in 1980 to 23% in 1988. I also did little to reduce other regulations affecting health, safety, and the environment. In 1981, I signed tax cuts into law, and tax revenue rose dramatically from $599 billion in 1981 to $991 billion in 1989. I was successful in ending the recession with my tax cuts, but I failed at my promise to reduce government spending because spending wasn't lowered, just shifted from domestic programs to defense. The one thing I regret about my presidency was the deficit I left us in. When I got into office, I was able to end price controls on domestic oil that started during Nixon's presidency. I also attempted to make good on my promise to repeal the windfall profit tax that Carter and Congress enacted in 1980 on domestic oil production, which I was successful on my promise because I was able to do so in 1988. I did this because it forced the U.S. to rely on foreign oil, which hindered the progress of our economy. To save the auto industry, I made a deal with Japan to only import 1.67 million cars in 1981, which forced the Americans to buy more American-made products. Alright, I need a setting for this joke. Rick, you're from Kansas, right? Sweet. This joke takes place in Kansas. A realtor came out one afternoon and was driving along a back road. He looked out his window and saw a chicken keeping pace with him. He was shocked because he was going 60. While looking at the chicken, he saw that it had 3 legs. When the realtor reached the house, he went to the farmer and said, "Did you see a 3-legged chicken pass by?" The farmer responds, "Yes. As a matter of fact, I breed 3-legged chickens." "Why do you breed 3-legged chickens?" said the realtor. The farmer responds, "Well, I like the drumstick, Junior likes the drumstick, and my wife likes the drumstick, so I got tired fighting over it. So I breed them now." The realtor says, "Oh, well, how do they taste?" The farmer responds, "I don't know. Haven't been able to catch one yet." A problem that faced America that was ruining the lives of our children was that of drugs, and I was committed to ending the recreational use of drugs. To fix this problem, the bill was passed that granted $1.7 billion for the war on drugs. Finally, I felt that the obstacles like domestic oil and the recession were more important than the environment. So when people asked me about increasing funds for environmental issues, I would politely decline their offer. Now, I would like to move on from my domestic plans and attack my foreign policy, particularly the Iran-Contra scandal. I would like to say during my presidency, I always did what I thought was best for the U.S. With that being said, I made a mistake and should not have disobeyed the laws of America. First, the executive branch secretly sold weapons to Iran, a terrorist state, which was banned by American law. Secondly, we violated another law, the Boland Amendment, by aiding the Contras rebels in the fight against the Sandinista government of Nicaragua. Third, these two covert ventures became entangled because the National Security Council member managed both operations. Finally, Oliver North diverted the profits we made from selling Iran weapons to fund the Contras in Nicaragua. Their causes were of involvement vary and hard to pinpoint, but one of them was that the Soviet Union had too much influence in Latin America, so we tried to disrupt their influence. The Sandinista were backed by the Cubans and the Soviets, while the Contras were secretly backed by the CIA, the US, and Argentina. I was not able to get back the backing I needed because of how the Democrats controlled Congress. Knowing that, they had the power to pass the Boland Amendment in 1982, which limited the power of CIA and Department of Defense operations worldwide, specifically in Nicaragua. They later strengthened this amendment, which made support almost impossible. Being rebellious, I told my National Security Advisor, Robert McFarland, to do whatever he can do to support the Contras. Iran, in the middle of the war, reached out to McFarland to ask for weapons. McFarland went to me for approval and said I could better our relations with not only Iran, but also Lebanon, which would increase our influence in the Middle East and would rival that of the Soviet Union. However, I was driven to accept the offer for another reason. Iran held 7 of our people in Lebanon, and I felt that it was my duty to bring them home. I later traded weapons for the hostages when I sent 1,500 missiles to Iran. I got 3 hostages, but then 3 more popped up. When the Lebanese newspaper Al Shura printed out a newspaper that exposed me on my illegal activities in November 1986, I went on television and vehemently denied any such operations had occurred. I later retracted my statement and said that I sold weapons to them but not for hostages. However, only 14% of America believed me. Attorney General Edwin Meese discovered that only 12 million of the 30 million Iranians reportedly paid went to the government's pockets. Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North of the National Security Council explained what happened to the missing money. He had been diverting funds from the army sales of the Contras in Nicaragua with the full knowledge of National Security Advisor Admiral John Poindexter, and with the unspoken blessing he assumed of me. We were able to provide the Contras money and weapons through Argentina because they agreed to help aid the Contras with us. We offered all sorts of help from intelligence to weapons in many more ways. Poindexter resigned as a result of this, and Oliver North was fired too. I then appointed the Tower Commission to investigate the scandal. There was no evidence of me meddling in the diversion of the funds, but I should have been in more control of my cabinet to prohibit these activities. This was a major blow to my popularity, but I was able to rebound and leave the office with the highest approval rating, which was 64%. The Iran-Contra scandal affected Nicaragua because they agreed on peace in an election in 1990. The Contras were able to win the election with the backing of President Bush. The newly elected president of Nicaragua established reforms and free market economy. Although they settled the conflict with the peace treaty, the animosity between the two sides were still apparent. Our country still has ties with Nicaragua and attempts to help them when they are in need, but this time, not illegally. Our relationships with Iran are still fragile and full of tension, and one day our country and Iran might fall down a slippery slope that we cannot come back from. I heavily believed in the policy of containment and not allowing communism to spread. Therefore, I took a strict policy against the Soviets and thought that in order for us to be in a position to negotiate, we had to have military power to back our claims. This is why I spent billions on self-defense and revived and started many military programs. To protect our country by increasing defense spending drastically, I revitalized the B-1 bomber program, increased our ground forces by thousands, and made advancements in our intelligence systems. I started a program called Star Wars by the media, was created where we would develop a weapon that could fire from space. This program was supposed to be able to shoot nuclear weapons out of the sky to improve our defense. A wide array of advanced weapons concepts, including laser particle beam weapons and ground and space-based missile systems, were studied along with various sensor, command and control, and high-performance computer systems that would be needed to control a system consisting of hundreds of combat centers and satellites spanning the globe were studied and worked on. A number of these concepts were tested throughout the late 1980s, and in fact, variations and spin-offs of these concepts are used today. What took up most of my time was the Soviet Union. Now, as a hobby of mine, I've been collecting stories from the Soviet Union citizens, and apparently it takes up to 10 years to get a car. They have to go through quite a process to get a car delivered for them, and they have to pay ahead of time. So, one day, a man walks up, puts his money on the table, and says, "Will it be in the morning or afternoon?" The man in charge says, "Sir, why does it matter? You'll get it in 10 years. The man responds, "Morning or afternoon?" The man in charge says again, "Sir, you will get it in 10 years. What's the difference?" The man responds, "Well, the plumber's coming in the morning." As humorous as this story is, this is one of the reasons why I called the Soviet Union the evil empire. The Soviet Union tried to take advantage of SALT and the détente. Nixon started to wait for their window to attack. SALT was an agreement between us and the Soviet Union where we would talk about the arms race and limiting the production of weapons. I thought that the Soviet Union was deceiving us and they were waiting for when we were at our weakest for them to attack. This is why I firmly believe that we needed to have a strict policy against the Soviet Union. I used all my resources to stop the expansion of communism and then try to take away their power in the world. This included involving myself in Latin America and China. China wanted to form a strategic association to block Soviet hegemony in Asia. Of course, we had to be loyal to Taiwan. However, we were still able to make a deal where China had to attempt to create peace with Taiwan, and we would limit our arms sales. When Gorbachev came to power, I saw something different in him, which was that he was willing to negotiate to end the Cold War and ease the tensions. I saw this as a time to strike. I went to Gorbachev immediately to start talks about easing the tensions. I decided to change my approach towards the Soviet and try to convince Gorbachev that his actions would not go to waste. My school of thought told me to try and find a common interest with Gorbachev so that conversation negotiations would become easier and more enjoyable. Gorbachev started to reform. He reached out to me and I was happy to respond with kindness. This led to the easing of tensions between our country and the Soviet Union. Gorbachev's braveness to reform ultimately was a driving force for ending the Cold War and should not go unnoticed. Now my final quote I have to say is, whatever else history may say about me when I'm gone, I hope it will record that I appealed to your best hopes, not your worst fears, to your confidence rather than your doubts. My dream is that you will travel the road ahead with liberty's lamp guiding your steps and opportunities are steadying your way.
2020 has been given the assignment to lead off ABC News coverage of the Democratic National Convention Monday evening. We'll be the first broadcast on the air in prime time at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 2020 for tonight. We're in touch, so you be in touch. I'm Hugh Downs. Good night.